Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Strokecast. I'm Bill Monroe. This week, I talk with teacher, author, dancer, and creator of the TangoStride program, Gabriela Condrea. I first met Gabriela when she spoke at Seattle's Young Adult Stroke Survivors Group a few months ago. She ended up having the whole room up and dancing. Gabriela specializes in developing connection techniques in Argentine tango and is the author of the book When 1 + 1 = 1 on tango and interpersonal relationships. Since releasing her book in 2011, she has presented her work on connection in 85 cities, 12 countries, and 3 continents. With over 20 years of experience in teaching, as well as 2 years of extensive studies in Buenos Aires and teaching tango since 2010, Gabriela has a keen ability to convey technical elements and the essence of what it takes to effectively dance two as one. Her approach to teaching tango is unique. She builds the dance through a collaborative process, well suited for people with 2 left feet, no rhythm, limited mobility like in TangoStride, and even those who flunked out of dance classes in their formative years, as well as people with experience in other dances and movement disciplines. Gabriela enjoys working with students of all levels and abilities, finding that the wide range fine-tunes her perception of even the most subtle details that make a big impact in her students' dancing, from novice to seasoned tanguero. A teacher, or sharer by trade, Gabriela holds a master's in education and a bachelor's in international relations and Italian language and literature. She taught 8th grade language arts for 4 years, 2 years in the Teach for America program, gymnastics at the Seattle Gymnastics Academy for 10 years, and has been teaching, including languages, mathematics, and tango since 2010, for over 20 years total. Between travels, you'll find her at home in Seattle or in Buenos Aires, sharing the lessons she's gathered from dance floors far and wide. From her intensive studies in Buenos Aires, where she first met tango, to Europe and all over North America, through workshops, classes, and private lessons for dancers of all levels. You can see videos of stroke survivors participating in TangoStride over at strokecast.com/tango. You'll also find links to learn more about TangoStride and Gabriela's Tango Happy Hour at strokecast.com/tango. Gabriela and I had our conversation at one of my favorite Starbucks locations in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, so you get to enjoy the same background noise we did. You can almost smell the espresso coming through your earbuds. So now, let's meet Gabriela and talk about how any stroke survivor who can stand, with assistance, and weight bear for 10 seconds can benefit from tango. Gabriela, welcome to Strokecast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Sure, I'm thrilled. You know, it was really interesting seeing your talk at the Young Adult Stroke Survivors Group a couple of months back, and really wanted to share that with other folks out there in the community.
Thank you.
So, how did you get into tango?
So tango was kind of like it was definitely not something that was on my radar or that I was planning on. I went to before Buenos Aires, I went to Peru, which, that's nowhere really near Buenos Aires, just in the same hemisphere on the same continent. That's about it.
I've heard amazing things about it, though.
Both places are worth visiting, I would say. But I did some volunteer work in Peru and then started traveling around, and it was sort of like meandering from one city to the next, and took a few months to do that, and then I ended up in Buenos Aires. So what I thought about tango was what I'd seen on TV, and like the sharp lines, the fishnet stockings, the red rose, and acrobatic movements, and just it wasn't something that really appealed to me. I thought it's nice to watch, but I don't really see myself doing that. but when in Buenos Aires, do what people are doing, I guess. So I met a group of fellow tourists that were going to a tango class and a tango club, and they invited me to join them, and that's kind of how I got hooked. It was love at first sight. It just was nothing like what I'd seen on TV, nothing like what I had imagined. It was just people hugging and walking around the dance floor together.
So from there, that really sort of drove your passion and your learning all about tango.
It did. I kind of dove in. I was a 8th grade teacher here in Seattle, and I had taken 1 year off, and then when it was time to decide if I was going back the next school year, I thought I want to dance a little more tango.
the versus going back to the junior high.
Yeah, which I do miss my 8th graders, although they're all grown up now. But I do miss working with teenagers, so it wasn't that. It was just tango kind of hooked me, and I still am teaching, just now mostly with adults, but people of all ages. And basically I had this desire, urge to share my passion that I found in tango.
So tell me a little bit about your book.
So I wrote a book called When 1 + 1 = 1, and it was just kind of musings and inspirations from the dance floor as I was learning to dance tango. I wrote it within the first 2.5 years of my own tango journey. And it really just touches on life experiences and lessons I learned from the dance floor, like focusing on the moment rather than who I'm going to dance with next and what happened in the last dance or the last week, and will that kind of dance happen again? I very much I'm very good at being way ahead of myself in the past, and just being in the present is, I think, a very freeing skill that I kind of had to develop to dance tango, because you really have to be attentive to what your partner is doing, their movements, so that you can continue to move together. That's one thing. Trust, and I think actually trust is a huge. Well, who doesn't? I don't think I could find a person that doesn't have some kind of a trust issue, whether that means, in the dance, for me, for tango, I found oftentimes that I thought, maybe my dance partner can't support me if I lean a little bit more on them, and that really seemed like it was about my dance partner. Well, it's just how it's my problem, but it's how I feel about them. But what I realized was actually it's how I feel about trusting myself, and that I won't do something like push my partner over or something like that. Doing just anything where we're taking a little bit of a risk. I see it in my students with just embracing to dance tango, to step forward into your partner's space is a challenge. Trust-wise, we don't want to step on our partner's feet, even though that's what I'm usually telling my partners or my students to do. Try to step on your partner's feet. Usually it works out okay. And for, I think, a stroke or traumatic brain injury, trust is huge, because basically you're having to learn to re-trust your body.
Right.
Trust, improvising, living in the moment. And so it's really not a how-to dance tango book. It's more like these are some life lessons that I found on the dance floor.
Well, that's awesome. And you've turned that into TangoStride. So what is TangoStride?
TangoStride is something that it's a technique that came out of basically my connection-centered teaching. When I first started teaching tango, I noticed that in most classes there was like a basic pattern, and you sort of memorize your pattern and your partner memorizes their pattern, and you kind of put the two together. What was missing for me was, how do you create that connection between people so that the movements that we're doing from one step to the next is a collaborative effort. So my teaching style and my method was kind of, built on that idea that I really want to get people to connect and move together and create the dance together. And so then when stroke survivors started coming to my Tango classes that I was just offering for the general public, one guy came with a cane, actually when I was back in Buenos Aires teaching near a major hospital, so I guess it kind of made sense. He was there for his rehab post-stroke, and we happened to have a class at a cafe, and he came in and just said, can I join you? Come on in. So I started modifying what I was teaching for him to just make it more focus on helping him improve his balance and his coordination, his spatial awareness. It was really interesting to see him get more and more steady on his feet. He would leave his cane and start dancing. And then I had a student here in Seattle. I have a Tango happy hour every Tuesday evening in Belltown. And a guy named Taw came rolling in there in his wheelchair and said, "I'm here for Tango." So first I had to figure out, can he stand? I didn't even really know, in a wheelchair sometimes somebody can't use their legs.
Sure.
But he could, and he said, he could use, I asked him if he used a walker, and he used one of the hand-me walkers with the 4 tennis balls. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, well, let me be your walker. So he started holding on to my arm and walking around the dance floor, and little by little, I developed techniques to help him improve his balance and his confidence and his stamina. So he made big improvements, and that kind of led to our first class at Valley Medical Center. Todd wanted to show his PT how he walked, and he asked me to come along. And it just so happened that at Valley Medical Center, they actually are building a program for stroke survivors. So they have Tai Chi and yoga. I think they're doing rock boxing for Parkinson's. They said, how about a Tango class for stroke survivors at Valley? Mm-hmm. So that's how we started our first program our first class that was specifically for stroke survivors and to help people with their walking ability. And that's TangoStride.
So what I think is key there is the things you're emphasizing it's about the balance, it's about the movement, it's about that connection with people. It's not about memorizing a list of particular steps.
Not at all. Not at all. And you don't have to bring red roses or fishnets either. I think the question that I get most often from people is, what the mobility level is that we work with in TangoStride. So TangoStride is really designed for people that need some support to walk. So whether that's a cane or a walker or even a wheelchair, as long as people can stand and bear weight for, I like to say 10 seconds. If you can do that for 10 seconds, then come, drop in, and let's see if we can make something happen.
And that's the key with that, or right around there, it's about give it a try.
Yes,
let's
absolutely.
see what works. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. You've gotten out of the house for a while.
Yes. You meet some new people.
Yeah, exactly that.
Have fun, hopefully. Even if you don't, become a tango aficionado for the rest of your life, or whatever it is that you're trying, the yoga, Tai Chi, there are lots of different activities. It's just, I think like you just said, you take advantage of the opportunity and just give it a try. And nobody will make you sign a contract that you're coming back. There's actually quite a bit of research about Tango being a good therapeutic tool. What we're doing in TangoStride, I think, is a little bit different because it's kind of more targeted to the walking specifically. So rather than just let's learn to dance tango, it's like we're going to work on our walking by using these dance-inspired movements. So it really depends on, I like to look for what people can do and then work from there. But definitely I'm aware of how the research has shown that the brain can form new neural connections, and it's not like if you have an injury, then there's no way to recover. There actually people make some really incredible recoveries. And they kind of rewire the way that the signal gets to their limb.
Here we are in early April of 2018, and what and when you talk about that, it's really interesting is I've just seen some research come out now showing that neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, where the brain can actually create new neurons, actually continues well into old age, well past people's 70s. And it's amazing to actually how that that has turned around over the last 20 years.
Right, from thinking, okay, if you have an injury to the brain, that's it, that part dies. But no, it's beautiful because I think it gives people hope. And then one of the reasons that Tango and like we were talking earlier, especially in this technique, we're not memorizing steps. So it's not about like, you could play memory, or you could do like a crossword puzzle where you never really know what's going to happen. You're sort of having to fill it in. Tango is like a puzzle with your body, with your partner. And because we always work with a partner, especially because, well, I like to say in all of my classes, we do need each other to dance, right? You can't dance tango by yourself. It takes two. And some
like
of
it
my
takes two to tango.
Exactly, it takes two to tango. And some of my students physically need support to stand, but all of my students need each other to dance. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that kind of, makes sense, but that element of working with another person is what makes it so you can never really predict exactly how it's going to go. And adapting to and changing, improvising, kind of like, keeps you on your toes, and that's what it does with your brain too. Mm-hmm. It makes your brain keep having to like solve these puzzles.
And that sounds like one of those areas where it's great not only for them, the stroke survivor, but also perhaps their caregiver as well, if their caregiver happens to be their dance partner and coming there.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I think what it does for caregivers, and not all of our students can come with their caregivers, so that's fine as well. We just kind of take turns and change. We keep our classes pretty small, so I can get around to everybody, which I like to do even if they come with a caregiver, just so I can kind of feel how they're moving. But for people that come with a care partner, I think it's a nice way for them to do something that's an activity, that's fun, that's not necessarily having really focused around their injury or their disease. Or it's a human connection.
Exactly, and that's awesome. So, but what has surprised you most about this? About Tango and with the stroke survivors, or?
So through the TangoStride program, we've seen. I've always liked challenges. I think that's kind of how I got into teaching 8th grade, and then working with people on their mobility. And I basically take each student because as you know, I'm sure that you've met many people who their injury or their stroke or TBI affected them in different ways.
Every stroke is different.
Every stroke is different. And so I look at each student as, what can this person do now? And then what's something we can push them, like what's one, small goal that we can push toward. And then when we achieve that, of course, there are many more, and that's how you grow. It's been really... I think amazing to see just how much progress people can make, even with really significant mobility challenges. I have a student who needed 2 people at least to kind of help them stand. Mm-hmm. Didn't really have an idea of where their center was, like really just needed a lot of support just to he could push off the floor with his feet, so that's a part of 10 seconds, you gotta be able to bear your weight. But as far as his balance, he really needed 2 people just to kind of bring him to, or hold him up, because he would have fallen. But didn't, of course, fall. But now, even just this last week, and he's been dancing with us for a little bit over a year and a half, he was able to stand in the middle of the dance floor, not in front of his wheelchair, without holding, barely leaning on my hand on his back. But
That's
other
awesome.
than that, yeah, it's just been incredible. What I think also, part of it is just we're having fun. There's music. I tailor the technique to each person, but then there's also the element of hope. Some of our students, had given up on walking, let alone dancing, and they seem to have this, there's this feeling of, oh, maybe I can do it. Mm-hmm. Some I think had kind of reached a plateau in their recovery, and sort of thought that's going to be as good as it gets, and maybe even other people in their life thought that too. But one student came in who was just working on standing for the first couple of classes and said, I want to dance. He walked himself across the room with support, using his own legs, and he hadn't done that in years. His caregivers hadn't seen him walk. We've seen people take off their leg braces, their AFOs, and try to, and then develop, control of their muscles for their knee, for example, to stabilize their knee. Where, at first, if you're using an AFO, there's probably a reason that you're having trouble controlling your movement, with whether it's the foot lift, like the foot drop, right, or stabilizing the knee. And we've seen people really make improvements. And I think we provide the support, and then it's a lot of hard work. I'm really in awe of my students, and but they bring it.
That's awesome. I think you touch on one of those really interesting things there, where we talk about giving them hope and giving them an idea that maybe they can do something. There's the quote attributed to Henry Ford. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not. The whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
Absolutely.
And while having a positive attitude may not be all it takes to do something, if you don't have the belief that you can do it, that you can do something different, if you don't believe that, if you don't think that, well, then you can't. Yeah. That's sort of the bare minimum.
Right?
Exactly.
Like you won't even try if you think you can't.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's really, it's I think also, working with my students in the TangoStride program really reminds me of just other challenges I'm facing in my own life, I don't know, we want to grow our program. So how do we do that? How do you start? Like one step at a time is what I tell my students, and they remind me that all the time. So whenever I'm facing a mountain, how do you climb a mountain? Well, if you don't take just one step, you're not going to get closer to climbing that mountain. You might not. Who knows? Maybe we'll try to climb the mountain. I don't get all the way to the top. But if I go one step at a time, I will make progress toward that goal. And I'll feel pretty darn good about it.
Awesome. And if you don't start, and if you don't take that first step, you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
That becomes the only guarantee. I think what's really interesting as I've gone through this whole stroke recovery process is realizing just how many of these fundamental basic concepts are really not just stroke recovery concepts. They're life concepts that apply in so many other areas.
Yes, absolutely.
So what do you wish more stroke survivors and caregivers knew about dance and about tango?
Well, I think first and foremost that it really doesn't take a lot of physical acrobatics or you don't have to be able to do that much just to get started with it. So I think for many people that's a barrier. But I also, my classes across the board, I've heard it all. I don't have rhythm, I have 2 left feet, I had one couple tell me that they got kicked out of a dance class many years ago. And so people have a lot of ideas or experiences with dance that maybe limit them or stop them from wanting to try that again. And I can understand, because if you got kicked out of a dance class, 5 years ago, you probably don't want to go back to another dance class. So my goal is to make it easy, because I think tango can be easy. I think that the social tango dancing is really not about how athletic you are or how hard you work. It's about finding a way to collaborate with your partner that brings you into a flow. Or as one of my students said the other day in the TangoStride class, that the way that we walk in TangoStride class really helps her feel the flow of walking. Because you're kind of walking through your partner across the room. And I think that's
a much more fun way to think about gait training.
Yes. Well, I think it could definitely be if somebody is doing physical therapy, this could be a good complement to that. So it gives you a chance to work on whatever the exercises that you're working on in physical therapy. You can apply them in an activity. So we want it to be a recreational opportunity for people. Also because apparently there aren't that many physical activities that people can do, especially if they have a lot of challenges physically, where they can really get up and move. So I know there's seated exercise classes, but if you can use your legs, you should use your legs.
Absolutely.
Because like anything, if we don't use it, whether it's like, my mom's a language teacher, so I think of languages a lot. If you study a language but then you don't use it, you don't speak it, you're going to forget it. And same thing with your muscles. If we don't use our muscles, then they forget how to do their job.
Exactly. As frustrated as we are with what our brains do in stroke, the brain is still a remarkably efficient thing. And if it realizes you're not using something, it's gonna start getting rid of it. It's why...
Proves it, right?
Exactly. Let's use those neurons and that energy for something else.
Yes.
Neuroplasticity has its pluses and its drawbacks in that respect. And
well, actually, maybe to the same point, so my mom is a linguist, and her name's Gabriela Condrea. I don't know if anybody wants to check her out. But anyway, she's about how, our brain is lazy. And I mean, not in a good way. Efficient, I think, is another way to put it. But really, if we don't force ourselves to work, then the brain is like, oh, well, we don't need that.
Right, exactly. It's and we see that when we talk about things like shoulder subluxation. I described it as part of the issue with my arm starting to fall away from my shoulder in the hospital was part of my brain was trying to get it back online. The other part was going, well, we're not using this thing anymore. Let's just get rid of it. And that's why occupational therapists, I think more than anyone else, caution against the term of learned non-use.
Yeah, and trying to incorporate as much as possible. Right? There's a neurologist at Valley Medical Center, Michael Praviti, and he says if something's challenging for you, that's what you should be doing after a stroke.
So if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
I have probably too many websites, but I'll point them to one.
And we'll also put all these links over at strokecast.com.
Thank you very much. TangoIsAboutTheConnection.com has my tango teaching. The TangoStride program is also linked to that, and my book is on there. And my information is there as well. So if anybody has questions, or I get phone calls from people, asking, this is my mobility. Do you think it would be a good fit for the class? And that's kind of like taking that first step to climb the mountain. If you have a question, please feel free to contact me and ask.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this too, to share your journey and the resources that you find with the community.
Okay, that conversation was a lot of fun. And even if you're not in the Seattle area, I hope you can take away some lessons from Gabriela. And that brings us to our hack of the week. One of the best accessibility devices I got for my apartment is the Easy Off Jar Opener. I can use it to easily open and close jars with just one hand. It's basically a plastic V with some teeth to grip jar lids. It attaches to the underside of the kitchen cabinets. That means I don't have to look at it, and I don't have to worry about losing it or dragging it out of a drawer. It's always there and out of the way. To use it, I just grab my jar of pickles. It always seems to be pickles for some reason. And slide the lid into the V. Then I simply grasp the jar and turn it. The teeth grab the lid so it stays in place as I turn, and my jar opens right up. When it's time to seal the jar again, I just turn it the opposite way. You can find my affiliate link to its Amazon page over at strokecast.com/tango. And that's it for this week. To learn more about Gabriela, TangoStride, or to see videos of stroke survivors in action, head on over to strokecast.com/tango. Are you a survivor who dances or who wants to dance? Go ahead and tell us about your experience in the comments over at strokecast.com/tango. While you've got your device out, be sure to subscribe to Strokecast in your favorite podcast app. And as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.